The thing about Tarnation was that it was made for originally for $214, and it was knocked together by this filmmaker Jonathan Couette on an Apple iMovie program, which apparently is, some way of editing on your home computer. So what he'd done was, for most of his life, he'd filmed himself and his family and his relatives on Super 8 and video and, picture cameras and that sort of stuff. And he got to a point in his life when he was trying to assemble all this stuff together as a kind of documentary about his family and his life and himself. And what it sounds like immediately is something like Capturing the Freedmen. Remember the Andrew Jarecki movie? I think Jarecki came on the programme, which was a very strange document about a family whose father had been accused of a terrible crime, but the family kept filming themselves as the family fell apart. Very weird. In the case of Jonathan Coette's documentary, his mother suffers appallingly from a series of syndromes that may be either cured or actually brought about by electroshock therapy that she had when she was young. The story of his mother, which is very strange, is that she was a child model. She fell off a roof. She lost the use of her legs, but they thought it might be psychosomatic. She was then, this is all per the documentary, subjected to about a year of electroshock therapy, after which she became, I suppose, borderline schizophrenic. And she had a very tough life, and Jonathan Couette, who was her young son, also had a tough life. Now, what he's then done is filmed himself and his family and his adoptive grandparents over a long period of time and put it all together in a film which is basically, look at me, look at my life, look how interesting or weird or strange or messed up I am, and look at all that. Now, I have to say, it is important to know that he is quite strange and weird and interesting up to a point. The clip you're going to hear now, which I think is fairly indicative of the rest of the movie, is in Jonathan Coette's teenage years, he mounted at his high school a musical production of David Lynch's Blue Velvet as the school play, which of course he filmed because he filmed everything. And here's have you seen David Lynch's Blue Velvet?
Many years ago, I think.
Very strange movie. Very, very interesting, very weird, very haunting, very odd. Okay, this is the Jonathan Coette teenage high school musical production. I'm only going to play a little bit of it because, believe me, you can't take more than a little bit of it, of Blue Velvet.
What these kids are doing is using Marianne Faithfull as regards her relationship with Mick Jagger as sort of a quasi-metaphor for the Dorothy Valance character.
You either rock out really crazily and get down,
yeah,
or you could go very demure while everyone's rocking out behind you and just be like, maybe fingers, maybe hips, and bopping a little shoulder here or there.
I might give the soundtrack album a miss.
Well, now, here's the thing. In a way, that clip sums up both the good and the bad about the movie. On the one hand, there is something quite entertaining about somebody who's mad enough to have done that, who at his in his youthful years made a series of horror movies, one of them which is called The Ankle Slasher, for which he features clips from in Tarnation. And there is some very inventive visual stuff going on. It's all very heavily processed images. It's not actually a documentary, I don't think. It's more in the tradition of the Andy Warhol factory movies like Flesh and Trash and all that sort of stuff. Now, when I saw it in Cannes, it also quoted very heavily from loads and loads of movies, and one of the films it quoted heavily from was The Exorcist. It had clips of The Exorcist in it, and I said when I saw it in Cannes, you'll never clear them. And by the time the film got here, surprisingly, those clips aren't there anymore, but you do get clips from Rosemary's Baby and The Wiz and The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, the Dolly Parton movie. Weird, so it is a strange collage of somebody's strange, bizarre life. On the one hand, interesting, impressive, up to a point. However, the problem with it is that narcissism only goes a certain way. And one thing that Jonathan Coette is very interested in is himself. And an awful lot of the film consists of film of himself filming himself, film of himself looking at himself, filming himself, film of him as a 12-year-old pretending to be Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. Just lots of stuff of himself. And there's a certain point at which interesting, sort of confessional mode just tips over into just, excuse me, I am now fed up with you. His mother's story is interesting, but it's hard to know exactly how much of it to take at face value. And I personally tired of him and found him annoying. I don't doubt, on the basis of Tarnation, which incidentally was picked up by Gus Van Sant, who's now the executive producer, and I suspect that the howling self-indulgence was something that Gus Van Sant rather liked, because Gus Van Sant himself is not known for his restraint. I suspect that in the future, Jonathan Coet will have a future as an independent filmmaker ahead of him, and he will do interesting stuff in the mode, perhaps, of Harmony Korine, but better than Harmony Korine, because obviously, as we all know, Harmony Korine is an idiot who couldn't direct Traffic.
Obviously, we all know, everyone's nodding now.
You know, and anyone who thinks that Gummo is anything other than a total piece of trash is a buffoon. Of course. But I doubt whether, and incidentally, for those who couldn't see Simon's face while he was saying that, that was sarcasm. I doubt whether Jonathan Coet will ever find a subject he finds quite as interesting as himself.
Do you think Peeping Tom is his favourite film?
Well, Peeping Tom's a great movie.
It is a great film, but, you know...
You know, of course, there is a self-reflexive moment in Peeping Tom, in which the director...
It's a what moment?
A self-reflexive moment in Peeping Tom, in which the young kid, who then turns out to be Peeping Tom, who's the guy who kills with his camera, the kid is played by Michael Powell's son, and the abusive father is played by Michael Powell. So that's a valid self-reflexive moment. I think that Coet is talented, but I do think that there's only a certain amount of time you can gaze into your own navel before you start gazing up your own derriere, and I think that there's, you know, it's a very thin line.